dude, I haven't even gotten to Pep Guardiola yet. Violette is our opening kickoff this morning, and I think we can look at it on two different fronts. It's damn awesome that they did it, but at the same time, if you're Austin, you're looking at this and you're crashing out of CONCACAF Champions League with Violette out of Haiti.
It's rough because, I mean, I think back to the Atlanta United CONCACAF Champions League games. And, I think we would all agree that the results on the road, except for that final one, didn't necessarily go our way, right? But they were good enough to where you go, all right, fine, you come home, you take care of business, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we did. We were able to come home and take care of business against teams that, quite honestly, were much better put together, actively playing, able to get visas. What Austin, I mean, look, I think you gave Violette a lot of praise and they deserve it. But the way that Austin, even with a rotated squad down in the Dominican Republic, handled this tie is really embarrassing, to be quite honest. I mean, sorry, but like you don't get to lose to a team that isn't functionally playing at this point in time, isn't able to field a full team of their own players. And, there are a lot of Austin fans making a stink about, a penalty kick call or whatever. That would have just tied the match for you. Like, that would have just tied the matchup for you. That wouldn't have won it. You still would have had to play. And so it's just, I don't know how there's any positive spin for Austin coming from this. And, to me, the funny thing is they got the team with a tree in its logo was undone by a team with a tree on the field.
So you're making me laugh with caffeine in my system. So then, Coco, thoughts on O'Shea Nation's performance last night? Thought he did very well, didn't make it about himself, managed the time wasting well, didn't lose control of the game in the tense moments.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people on the Austin side complained that he helped Violette, but again, they need to look at themselves.
Dude, you had 11 minutes in the second half.
Yeah, I mean, because he did. He added what? I mean, it was almost 11 minutes, I think, almost 12 when it was all said and done, right? I forget exactly what the final, because I know they gave 9. And I was
it's
like,
okay. It was 101 and change when they blew the final.
Yeah, there you go. So, yeah, because, Coco, to your point, like, I think it was given 9 minutes, right? And then also adding time for what would have been lost time during that stoppage time was appropriate. I mean, I thought that was what we need to see more of.
Coco, once again, good thing that he was basically a non-factor in the match last night. And Austin took an MLS 1, and this is Coco. Coco says Austin took basically an MLS 1.0 approach to CONCACAF Champions League, took a second team to the Dominican Republic.
That's not an MLS 1.0 approach, though, in my opinion. I think that's a smart approach to a competition against a team that, quite honestly, your second team should still beat. Like, I'm sorry. That they're like our MLS Next Pro teams should be able to handle Violette in a two-legged playoff, And I don't think that, like, bringing a rotated squad down to Haiti was something bad. I really just don't. I'm sorry. And I don't think that's a 1.0 approach. I actually think that's more of a 2.0, 3.0 approach because you actually have the depth to hopefully rotate a squad. It just didn't work. And it failed miserably. And part of that is tactics from Josh Wolf. I think sometimes you have to realize that you can't always play the first team strategy with your second team players because they're just not good enough.
And Amro Tarek can't have an own goal the way that he did also.
That's absolutely right as well. I mean, it was a spectacular finish.
Absolutely.
Still an own goal. I think that it's right to criticize the performance. I don't think that bringing a second choice team was necessarily the bad approach because, I mean, how many Premier League teams do the same thing in a Europa League matchup? I mean, if it's Champions League, sure. But
or FA or Gummy Bear Cup.
Right. The Carabao Cup is notoriously the cup that all the youth players play in for these Premier League teams. So
yeah,
I don't think their approach was terrible. They just played poorly. And
you did not
take advantage of their chances.
Didn't execute the way.
I mean, the problem they have is that Gyasi Zardes is playing for them. Really, that's the issue they have. That's my hot take on the U.S. roster drop day.
Well, all right. So since you went there with the breaking news that happened yesterday during the show, and I got to use the breaking news sounder, and I was happy about that. Zendejas to the USMNT, and you get the roster announcement. What popped into your head once you saw the breaking news, which gave us the breaking news sounder on the show, and then the announcement?
Yeah, I thought that it was expected, to be honest, because as for those of you who don't know, the drama behind Alejandro Zendejas is that he is a U.S.-born Mexican-American player. He played for U.S. teams at the youth level. In fact, played for us in actual competitions. Therefore, he was tied to the U.S. Now, not cap tied officially at the senior level, but he was supposed to continue that path for the U.S. Mexico calls him up, plays him in a couple of matches when they shouldn't have, because he was not theirs to play. He would have had to have filed paperwork to officially declare for Mexico at the senior national team level. We call him, after that debacle, we call him up in January. He plays one game, played very well in the one game, despite, not really getting a whole lot of the action. I thought he had a really good second half against Serbia. But, I mean, I'm not surprised, because I think he would have had to do more work to switch to Mexico.
Yeah.
And I think right now, if you're looking at the U.S. team, you just have a much greater opportunity ahead of you being a U.S. men's national team player than you do for El Tri, because we have, despite Mexico saying they're hosting the World Cup, it's the United States hosting the matches that matter in that World Cup.
Zendejas, and this is the player. The announcement is today. I'm getting ahead of myself since I've got all these things going on, and I'm still trying to get the high school basketball out of my brain.
Long weekend for you.
long week, brother. Zendejas' selection for El Tri, for those that don't remember, he did it without ever filing paperwork with FIFA to make him eligible to play for Mexico. Participation was with the USU 17s, tied him to the U.S. until he files a switch of association. FIFA approves the app. FIFA orders Mexico to forfeit those 2 senior friendlies and 3 U23 matches where Zendejas played, issued a fine of just under $11,000 for fielding Zendejas. Didn't affect his eligibility to play for the USA or Mexico, provided you actually do finally submit the paperwork.
Right.
But you play, El Tri's like, yeah, come on, and then you don't file the paperwork, and you end up getting fined $11,000 for it. I mean, come on now.
Yeah, it was okay. I'm going to choose my words a little carefully. Try to choose them carefully.
Wait, what?
But it's another example of the Mexican Football Federation not truly respecting the players who they're trying to recruit. And I think of all the things that Greg Berhalter did very well during his time, which I'm sure we will get to that.
Sure.
I think that he did a great job of giving the players all the information they needed to make the decision without pressuring them into making a decision. And I think Zendejas is another example of Mexico being a little bit predatory in their recruiting practices, while the U.S. just said, hey, you want to come play? Okay. Again, he grew up in the United States. He grew up playing in the U.S. youth soccer system. So it's not like we had to do a whole lot of work to get him. But, it was just our ability to say, look, you can come in, experience the camp, hang out with not even the top tier guys, but, a couple of other dual nationals, Cade Cowell, Brandon Vasquez, both Mexican-Americans with choices that they could make. I think Cade is officially cap tied. I think, actually, no, he's not 21 yet. So I think he still has time to make a decision. He may have played 3 matches already, though. I expect Cade to be on the roster for this March, by the way.
Absolutely.
I have zero reason to believe otherwise. Let's just put it that way. So I think that was probably good for Zendejas, and I think more than anything, just good to get him in there and let him know that he can be a part of the squad moving forward. To Coco's point, the winger depth right now is really good, but also the winger depth was a little bit of a question because we have 2 guys in Brendan Aronson and Gio Reyna who historically for the U.S. have played on the wing, who I think we would all agree are not at their best out wide, right? Gio is obviously a very talented player who can probably play anywhere. He plays out wide for Dortmund all the time, but I think we all see him as more of a central attacking player. Brendan Aronson, very much the same. So Zendejas gives you legitimate winger depth, especially now that you're phasing out some guys like Jordan Morris, Paul Arriola, who I think we need to move on from. And he sees himself as an opportunity to fit in there.
When you look at this upcoming impending announcement, what would surprise you because we can get locked into names if you want, but what would surprise you and what would give you reason for pause, even though these matches are just kind of out there? There's nothing really.
I don't want to see Paul Arriola, Jordan Morris, or Christian Roldan. Y'all know how I feel about Christian Roldan. I think he's the most overrated player who's ever stepped foot in MLS. That's actually not true, but he is widely overhyped for just being a guy who seems to be nice, which I'm sure he's a very nice person. But I don't want to see those MLS guys in there because we have younger MLS talent that I want to see. I mentioned Cade Cowell, Brandon Vasquez. In the midfield, I'm hoping we see Georgi Mihailovic, Taylor Booth. Christian Roldan holding spots on the roster. Roldan, Arriola, Morris. It's not going to help us take that next step because we've seen what they can provide the United States men's national team. We need to find better talent. And I think it's out there. But also you have a guy like Cade Cowell, who's 7 to 9 years younger than both Morris and Arriola, who plays a lot like both of them, but has obviously, again, 9 years to learn and be hopefully better than they are. And I would rather take that bet now on a Cade Cowell type player than another appearance by Paul Arriola where he doesn't really produce anything. I love the phrase about Paul Arriola. He's always danger adjacent, but never actually dangerous.
Can we use that as a hashtag now? Danger
adjacent. That is the Scuffed podcast, their original.
All right. Since we are in this realm, since we are down this aisle of the grocery store, it's not quite frozen foods and it's not quite the snack aisle, but we are going down this aisle here in the grocery store of soccer. All right. Since we're now in the discussions about the men's national team, Alston-Bird came out yesterday. Or was it a day and a half ago, 2 days ago? It's like it all runs together now.
Yeah, I know.
So let's say 2 days for the sake of argument. Yesterday, we got into the larger discussion about the phrasing in Alston-Bird that said that I'm paraphrasing, just basically that there is nothing that should hold Greg Berhalter back from being considered to be manager, to continue being manager for the U.S. men's national team. Yes, we will get into the other items as we go here, and I know I've only got you for about another 10 to 12 minutes, so this might be more rapid fire than we would like. But let's start with the idea of Greg Berhalter legally being declared by Alston-Bird that there is no reason to hold him back from being considered for the men's national team job. Yesterday, we went down the national team rabbit hole trying to figure out who it could be, who it should be. After Alston-Bird came out, I doubt very much changed in your mind.
I think I've said pretty clearly that I didn't want Greg Berhalter to get a second go at it as U.S. men's national team manager, not because I think, and that was before this, right? Mm-hmm. That was before this, even the World Cup ended, just because I don't believe in 2 cycle managers at the national team level. especially if you haven't really won anything, right?
Right.
And I think the U.S. is in that weird. We're in that weird situation where we're good enough to expect better, but still not quite at that level to feel like we should have done better. We're not Canada, right? Where John Herdman was clearly building something. Like I think Berhalter was building something. I really do. I don't necessarily think that it was a successful team, but it was a good team. And I think that Berhalter did good enough to look back on his time as U.S. men's national team manager with a positive light, right? He had a very good win percentage. He beat Mexico many times. I don't think he was really ever challenged outside of playing Mexico and Canada. We struggled on the road in qualifying, which I know we always do, but we finished third overall in the qualifying campaign this time around, which despite being, I think, better than Mexico finished better than us, and Canada finished first. So I think there are ups and downs to the Berhalter tenure. I think ultimately it ended up being a positive, a good coaching job by Greg Berhalter. But I think that regardless, after this World Cup, you could have just said, thank you, Greg, for your service. We're going to move on and try to find someone better. Now, though legally, I understand that they cannot exclude him from candidacy because there's no reason to do that. And I think now you're looking at it's more of a legal reason to say he's still a candidate so that you don't get in any trouble or not dragged into court again, which I think U.S. Soccer is trying to avoid. We don't need to go to court anymore. I think now would be a great time to look at Greg and go, look, though the legalities of this situation do not exclude you from the search, we don't feel that it would be the best decision for you to come back into the team, given all that has happened. And especially now that you're looking at a 4 to 5 month hiatus as manager, it would be weird to come step back in. And I know Hudson was probably continuing most of the things that Greg was doing, but
he's a substitute teacher.
I just don't think it would make a lot of sense for Greg to come back at all. But I felt that beforehand. So I am of the camp where we need to move on. I think we can find coaches better than Greg. I don't think they'll be significantly better, but I think we can find coaches better than Greg.
And at the same time, you've got to get all of these hires correct in this corporate infrastructure that has to be laid out, because you're not getting a head coach until you get a sporting director. And you have the trickle down effects of all of these hires. Right. And I know that we're sitting there and we're kind of looking at the bottom of the Jenga pyramid here and trying not to pull out the wrong peg. But all of these hires that have to be made now, you got to get them right. I mean, yeah, it's 23 and 26 is 3 years away, but there's an ish load of planning that has to be done on a lot of different levels so you can represent this hemisphere as best as humanly possible with this growing squad that is, that is becoming more experienced, that is becoming the next quote unquote golden generation, whatever, all of the promise that's attached to this group. All of these hires have to be right.
Well, I don't think the sporting director hire matters for this golden generation. And I think that's what the U.S. Soccer is finding, that it's hard to find the right fit for this federation sporting director gig because, and this is going to be what they're going to run into, and you've seen with the candidates who have turned them down, right? This is not really sporting in the way that we think of it. The sporting director of U.S. Soccer is not just overseeing day-to-day operations of the teams playing on the field. And if anything, you have the GMs of both programs who do that, right? Mm-hmm. The sporting director is overseeing coaching development, which seems to be a debacle right now, referee development, grassroots programs up and down the chain at 50 plus state associations. A lot of states have multiple associations looking at new New York. So it's not the Carlos Bocanegra scouting, putting together a roster, overseeing the academy, right? That's not what's going on at the U.S. soccer level. And I think that's going to make it hard to find the sporting director, especially when at this level you do have to have some skin in the game. I do, to be a sporting director, because you're, again, the job could be boring in the sense that your drive, your mission can't just be to win soccer games at this position.
Yeah. Burned and Coco are in this morning. Burned asking, do you think it would help the men's national team to find a midfield that can play with the ball better than Adams, Musa, and McKinney? Burned is not convinced that such a pressing, heavy midfield, which is pretty bad on the ball except for Eunice's dribbling, can win games against top European and South American clubs.
Oh, I mean, I agree. But who are those players? So that's the question right now that we need to try to find. I think, Burned, my general view of this year, 2 years maybe leading up to the Gold Cup, is I think it's pretty clear who our starting 11 are. I don't think that's changed, even Tim Ream, to be quite honest, right now. I don't think that's changed. And even if you want to say, okay, Tim Ream's out, then you just slot Chris Richards into that spot, and you've got Richards and probably CCV. I don't know if Ream and Zimmerman are going forward, but let's just pretend. Your starting 11 is the standard that you have set. The goal for anyone not in that starting 11 is to prove that they deserve a spot there. So, again, we haven't seen a more ball-centric midfield, right? No, Jason. No, he's not. It's not that they aren't good. It's, are they good enough on the U.S. men's national team? And again, this also has to do with who that next coach will be. Greg Berhalter liked the McKinney, Musa, Adams midfield. I would also posit that the McKinney, Musa, Adams midfielders are the three most individually talented players at those positions, even better than Gio Reyna in the midfield that we've seen, right? So that's kind of be the problem, is not the problem. The goal for this year is to try to find players who can raise that level, who can overcome those three. I don't know if they exist. Maybe Brendan Aronson, maybe Gio Reyna in the midfield. But those three players in the midfield proved to be very good. So, do you give up a tactical shift to get lesser quality players in the midfield just because you feel like it might make you a little more stylistically fun?
Also on the board discussing sporting director. Coco, the sporting director job for the Fed is not an attractive enough job for the level candidate people
No, it's not.
want. People that are designed for the position have better club jobs.
Because guys, people who are in football, right? The salary is not going to be there, to be blunt, right? The salary at the U.S. for the people that people want, the salary of U.S. soccer sporting director is not going to be there. That's one. Two, as I've laid out, the job responsibilities are far more administrative than they are at the club level for that same title, right? Sporting director. It's not even quite the same as president of a club, because I've heard people throw out Garth Lagerwey. Garth would be a great CEO, maybe, of U.S. Soccer. I don't know if he would be a great sporting director of U.S. Soccer, because Garth now, as president of Atlanta United, is overseeing a lot more operations than what he would have to do as a sporting director of U.S. Soccer. And again, he's overseeing. He has more direct involvement with those, and I think that's what the drawback for most people is, the direct involvement. Ernie Stewart described his time almost more like a politician trying to influence people down than he was actually making change. And that's not a bad thing. I mean, that's his goal, is right to kind of cast his vision across the entire organization of grassroots soccer in this country. But at the end of the day, his actual impact is going to be very low, because all these individual state associations technically get to do their own thing.
now that I don't know how much of Alston-Bird that you have had the chance to read once it
Not
came,
all of it.
but it is now out, and I am still waiting for some kind of a response from Austin FC, since we seem to have Austin FC on the brain this morning, where Claudio Reyna is concerned. I thought it was interesting that the Vancouver Whitecaps came out with a statement specifically saying that at no time have they had any conversations with Greg Berhalter about Sebastian Berhalter. You could feel that there was you could sense that the light had kind of diminished at that point. There was a decent amount of shade being thrown. From what you have taken in from Alston-Bird in the time that you've got left here this morning, what were some of your larger takeaways?
So the first takeaway that I have is that I will again reiterate, this really sucks for Rosalind Berhalter to have all of this put into public light for something that happened to her that was very traumatic. And to be fair to Greg, a little bit traumatic for him, right? Like, this was clearly an embarrassing situation that he, yes, put himself in, but something that he clearly regrets, and something that he clearly has tried to move on from. And I think the entire Berhalter family and Rosalind's family have tried to move on from. But that's my biggest takeaway, is that sucks for them. Next one is that Claudio and Danielle, specifically Claudio with his connections, have abused their namesake and been really just bullies for a number of years. And, some people are trying to give them grace by talking about the unresolved trauma of losing a child, which I fully understand is real, that they probably still have some leftover unresolved trauma, because I'm sure that doesn't just heal within a year of what happens, obviously.
Right. Yeah.
But I don't think that is a great excuse for the way that they've behaved for multiple years. This wasn't a trauma-induced incident at the World Cup. This is a pattern, not even a pattern. This is a modus operandum of behavior for Claudio Reyna when it comes to the U.S. men's national team, and when it comes to Gio. It is, he really made himself look bad.
Mm-hmm. They both did.
He made himself look bad. This was not, no one else did this to him. Claudio did this to himself.
And the other element that I wanted to discuss with you came from PSRA and the comments that Claudio Reyna made that were divulged in Alston-Bird. Redacted also informed us that Pronoun Redacted received an email from Reyna in and around July 2018 in which Mr. Reyna complained about a female referee in a match involving Gio Reyna. We obtained an email from Mr. Reyna in July 2018 in which Mr. Reyna stated, quote, "Field referee everything. So embarrassing all the way around," end quote. Mr. Reyna sent a follow-up email that stated, "And in all honest, can we get real and have male refs for a game like this? It's embarrassing, guys. What are we trying to prove? A game like this deserves better attention." Redacted circulated the email internally and wrote, "This is truly sad to see. I believe we should regroup internally and decide a path we want to take after this." In his communication last week, "This is not appropriate or acceptable." PSRA comes out and says Mr. Reyna's sexist and misogynistic comments about female referees are deplorable. PSRA considers his actions disqualifying for employment at MLS and beyond. MLS cannot provide a haven for Mr. Reyna's opinions while also celebrating the quality and diversity of its own officials, capital O.
I mean, they're not wrong.
No.
Because you see weekly, we have female officials in MLS. Mm-hmm. So, first off, we need more female officials, period. We need more women to be referees at the soccer that we have at all levels. This is just another example of what I see on a weekly basis, where people think that just because you are a woman or a female, you're somehow not good enough to referee soccer. And that is bullshit. Just to be quite
There's
honest.
the explicit rating for today.
Sorry. There, I'll do this.
No, yeah,
is,
well, yeah, exactly. That's the long version, and I learned that was the long version.
Yeah.
After the short.
Yeah.
For those of us that are on Twitter and on Twitch.
It is, and I'm sorry. That's look. You can criticize a referee's performance without bringing in gender.
Yeah,
like you just can't.
You can universally suck. That's not an issue.
Yeah, you can be bad without being male or female.
Yeah.
And I agree. I think that I don't see how he can be involved in soccer in this. I'm sorry. Like this is a pattern of behavior.
Mm-hmm.
It's not even a pattern. It seems to be just how he operates.
Yeah.
Period. Now, granted, it seems like this is how he operates when Gio is involved, but that's a problem. And then you wonder why the kid acted like a little spoiled brat at the World Cup.
Yeah, because that's the environment you were raised in.
So, I've heard that Gio will be back in the squad this March camp, so that's positive.
Yeah.
I hope he doesn't play because Lord knows we don't need him to get hurt anymore. I am of the opinion of let the Stars not play, especially that game down in Grenada.
Bubble wrap into Grenada.
Yeah. Let's wait till they're home and on a real field down in Orlando. But yeah, it is positive that Gio supposedly will be back in the squad for this camp. Props to Anthony Hudson for, I don't know about mending the relationship, but just telling him that like, hey man, we're good.
Yeah.
Which I think Gio as a person probably, felt some type of way about what happened at the World Cup.
Right.
But also has, like, as a professional, probably understands, like, okay, I got to move on. And I'm sure Dortmund has been telling him similarly, right? I mean, Dortmund is a very professional, well-run club for the most part. And his coaches there are very professional, very experienced, and I'm sure have no problem helping a very young, very talented player grow. So I'm glad he's back. I think, if anything, you need to know that this report reflects nothing on Gio Reyna, his soccering ability, and his future career. Unfortunately, this will color a little bit what his career looks like, and he has his parents to thank for that.
Barnos Prime 19 at the SoccerForUS POD. Get into the real world. We'll see you next week.
Thank y'all. See y'all next week.